Hi Year 11, welcome to our next lesson in the changing economic world topic. Right, today I want you to start by answering enough questions from here to give you 10 points. Okay, so you choose whether you do more of the small point questions, and you'll need to do maybe 4 or 5 of those, or whether you do 2 5-point questions to get your 10 points. Okay, I'm going to turn myself off the video so you can see them all. So maybe spend about 10 minutes on this starter. Pause the video now, choose the ones you want to do, write the question out, and then write your answer. Okay, so pause now and off you go. Right, so you finished that. We're looking today, lesson 5, how do we use population pyramids? Now, population pyramids could well come up in the tests and the exams you're going to have. They're quite an important way to look at population structure, and they link very closely to the demographic transition model, which we looked at last time. So put that title, lesson 5, how do we use population pyramids? And then we're ready to move on. Now, first thing, what I want you to do is I want you to do a little true or false quiz. So I'm going to show you some questions or some statements, and all I want you to write is whether you think they are true or false. So number 1, there are over 7 billion people in the world, true or false, and you can just put T or F, that's fine. So number 1, T or F. Number 2, about 15% of people live on less than $1 per day. Do we think that's true or false? Is the number higher, or do you think that number itself is too high? Number 3, about 77% of people in the world live on less than $10 per day. Again, is that too high, too low? Is it true or is it false? Number 4, about 24% of people, almost a quarter, do not have electricity. Do we think that's true or false? Number 5, about 16% of people do not have access to clean water. Number 6, about 39% of people do not have access to toilets. So not only toilet paper, which will be terrible, but do they not even have access to good sanitation to personal toilets? Number 7, 8% of people never get enough food to eat. Okay, so those are the people that are going to be suffering from malnutrition and obviously leading to potential famine. Is that true? Should it be higher? Should it be lower? Number 8, 20% of people over 15 cannot read or write. So that links back to literacy rates. Do we believe that the literacy rate in some countries is lower than 80%? Okay, so let's give a quick marking of your answers now. So number 1, it was true. There are over 7 billion, about 7.4 billion now. Number 2 was also true. There are 50% of people who live on less than $1 a day. There are also 77% of people who live on less than $10 a day. Number 4 was also true. About 24% of people do not have electricity. About 16% of people do not have access to clean water. That is true. About 39% of people do not have access to toilets. It's true that 8% of people never get enough food to eat. And it's also true that 20% of people over 15 cannot read or write globally. It was probably predictable that I was going to do that, and they were all going to be true, but give yourself a mark out of 8. So obviously, I'm hoping that you found some of these surprising, shocking, and obviously this is what we're looking at in this topic. Like, what problems can this unequal world cause? So we'll go on later to look at what are the main causes of differences in development, but also what are the consequences of that. And that is there where we start looking at things like migration and how this inequality leads to some of the issues that we've got in the world. So Obviously, we're going to be looking at population pyramids today. This image here to start thinking about the major factors that affect population growth. I'll give you a minute or so to have a look at it. So if you want to pause just to think. So you've had a chance to think. What we can see here is, major factors affecting growth. Well, changes in agriculture, changes in types of the economy around the world. So lots of countries moving from agriculture, where you need high numbers of people, to manufacturing or even service industries where there's less people involved. In the UK, less than 1% of people work in agriculture, whereas 200 years ago, that would have been over 70%. So mechanization, the use of technology like tractors and combine harvesters, things like that, means that one person can do the job that hundreds had to do before. Education also affects population growth. As people become more educated, they may delay having children, they then get better jobs, they delay having children, they have fewer children. That can reduce growth. The equality around the world is reduced in population growth. As more women have equality to men, which is obviously a good thing, that means that women are delaying having children or choosing not to have children at all, and that reduces the birth rate. And also urbanization, so the movement of people to cities. Urban areas tend to have lower birth rates than rural areas, but they also tend to have greater wealth. So wealth can obviously affect the birth rate. Okay, so we're going on to look at population pyramids. Now this cartoon represents a population pyramid. So population pyramids show the age and gender structure of a population. So here we can see a population of a country where the birth rate is low, and the working population is also lower than the oldest people in society. And as we can see, that is putting a strain on the economy and on the society, because as people get older, they've paid money into the economy, but they are now looking to take money out through pensions. They're also potentially producing less, paying less tax, and so that puts more of a strain on the sort of working population. So this population pyramid would be typical of somewhere like Japan, and anywhere that's in stage 5 of the demographic transition model, which we looked at last lesson. But we need to understand how population pyramids work, so that's what we're going to go on to do. Now, first thing I want you to do is, can you watch this YouTube clip? So if you copy, obviously you won't be able to copy and paste, but just copy this into a YouTube, into a internet link, you know what I mean, and then watch the video first, and it will talk you through population pyramids and give you some information on them first, and then we'll go through the lesson. So I'll just pause this now, put the link in, watch that, and then come back. Okay, great. So you've watched that. Let's go on to have a look at population pyramids in more detail. So here we can see a population pyramid for the UK. This is a bit outdated, 2001. So first of all, we'll think that everything you can see is now 20 years further on. So these people, this sort of bulge, the highest proportion of people in the UK in 2001 were in the 30 to 44 range. Those would have now moved up by 20 years. The low birth rate would have moved up 20 years. So basically, a population pyramid is a way of showing population structure. And what you have is you have the vertical axis is different age groups, often goes up in years, in 5 years. The horizontal or x-axis is always shown in percentage or in the actual number. So on this one, we can see that it's shown in population in millions, but often it can be the percentage of the population in that age range. You will normally have one gender on one side and one on the other. So male normally on the left, female on the right. And it's split into sections. So we have the ages from 0 to 14 tend to be called young dependents, because they are dependent still on the working population for education, for money. Then you tend to get a group called the elderly dependents. They tend to start being dependent on society in terms of pensions, and also maybe for healthcare and care. And then the central section is what we would call the working population. And again, when we've looked at migration in the past, this is the general age range where people tend to migrate, especially in the younger part of this. And so that can then increase birth rate. Now, I'd like you to write down this key term. So population structure, just so when we refer to this, you understand. So can you write down population structure and put the definition? The population pyramid displays the age and sex structure of a country or given area. Because population pyramids don't need to be just for countries, you can do them of regions, cities. Okay, so when we look at a population pyramid for a developing country, we can see it has a particular shape. So it's still got male, female on one side and the other. You've still got, I mean, this one is done in percentages across the x-axis, and you've still got sort of the 0 to 5 excuse me, age range. But we can see that it has a very wide base and a very narrow top, and it's almost a pyramid shape. This shows us some specific things. It shows that the birth rate in this particular country is high. So there are lots of children being born. But we're seeing that the numbers of children then decreases quite rapidly. As you move up each section, it goes down quite a lot, which is leading to the pyramid shape. That means that there is a high death rate, because you wouldn't expect to see so many children being born and then decreasing rapidly unless those children are going somewhere. And in this case, we're seeing infant mortality being high and child mortality being high. You're also seeing it's very narrow at the top because it has a low life expectancy. Not many people are living into the older age groups. Here we can see a different one. So this is population pyramid typical for a developed country or high income country. We can see that the bulk is in the center. We can see that the birth rate is not rapidly decreasing as you move up through the ages, which means that most children, the big majority of children, are living till they're 5, till 10, till 15, and they're moving up through the pyramid. We can see that it's wider at the top because people are living longer. We can still see that more females are living than males into the older ages. That's typical across the whole world. Women tend to have a longer life expectancy. Okay, so what I'd like you to do, first little task. So I want you to look at these 3 population pyramids, and thinking about what they show, I want you to complete the annotations. Okay, so you could draw a very quick shape of the pyramid and then just label each one and finish off the annotations shown. So a wide base on the first population pyramid shows what? A narrow top shows what? And a step between each age group, again, shows what? And then just add that that's typical of stage 2 in the demographic transition model, so a low income country. So that links back to what we did on DTM. And then look at the middle one. There's a slight error on that one. It should say DTM stage 4, and that's a high income country. And then add the information for the last one, which shows a country typical of stage 5. So remember, that was declining population, so Japan or Germany. Okay, just pause the video so you can complete that task. And now we will look at the answers. So a wide base, think about what that shows. That should show that there's a high birth rate. The narrow top shows the low life expectancy. And a step, a decrease between each age group, shows a high death rate. And as I said, this typical pyramid is very typical of a stage 2 country in the demographic transition model. Right, the center one, we can see that we've got a relatively narrow base. So that's showing a low birth rate. It's a tall pyramid with a wide top, which shows a long or high life expectancy. And as I said, this is typical of a country in stage 4, not stage 5, of the demographic transition model. And then when we look at stage 5, we can see this one has a very narrow base, which shows a low birth rate. It's a tall pyramid with a wide top, which shows a high life expectancy. And with this one, we can see that there's actually fewer births than deaths. if the top is narrower, sorry, if the base is narrower than the top. So here we would start to see a natural decrease and the population of this country would start to decrease. So this is typical of stage 5. Now, we can use population pyramids to look at specific information about a country. So I've already said that this is typical of a poorer part of the world. And here we can see Kenya in 2008. So very high birth rates, but big steps, which shows high infant mortality and high child mortality. And then we can see it narrows quickly, which shows that there's a short life expectancy. And again, the steps between each 5-year period show that there's high death rates in Kenya at this time. In some countries, we know that the government have encouraged couples to reduce their family size. So obviously China's one-child policy, people will have heard of. And we can see that on this population pyramid. So we can see that in the last 10 years, there's been an encouragement for the birth rate to decrease, and that's happened quickly. And we can see that the birth rate is decreased very quickly. This one, again, typical of richer parts of the world. So we've got a narrower birth rate. We've got more people being born in, more people were born, say, 20, 30 years ago, meaning the middle is bigger. And then what we're starting to see is that central bit moving up and the birth rate narrowing, which could lead to problems in the future. Have a think about this one. What do you think, what policy may this country have encouraged to make the population pyramid look like this? So you've got a bigger group of males between, say, 30 and 54, or 30 and 49. So what this shows is the impact of immigration. So this country, I think this country was the United Arab Emirates. They have been going through sort of major building program, major improvement. So they need construction workers. So they've encouraged migrants from all over the world, especially India, to move there. And that's particularly males between the age of 30 and 54. And you can see that that's then affected their population pyramid. And here we can see some examples of specific countries around the world. So we've got each of the stages shown. So South Sudan, new country, very poor, high death rates, high birth rates. We can see that shown in the population pyramid and low life expectancy. Bangladesh, we can see, is more the typical pyramid shape. So high birth rates, low, relatively high death rates, showing it sort of step in each time, and low life expectancy. Then you've got stage 3. So Brazil, one of our newly emerging economy example, and we can see that the birth rate is starting to decrease. We can see that the steps have lessened, so people are living longer. And so in sort of 20, 30 years time, their population pyramid would look much more like the one we've got for the UK, stage 4. So we can see in those that life expectancy has increased, that death rates have decreased. And then you go to Japan and you can see that it's the top heavy population pyramid. So aging population, we can predict that there'll be issues in terms of looking after the elderly population in the future, the cost of healthcare, things like that. Okay, so I'm taking a couple of examples here. So we've got Japan and we've got Mexico, both from 2016. And this is where your knowledge of population pyramids may need to be used in the exam style context. So no one's going to ask you to draw a population pyramid from scratch. You may be asked to complete population pyramids. That might be a 1 or 2 mark skill question. So obviously that would mean looking at the key, checking the data, using a sharp pencil, being accurate. And you may also be asked to interpret population pyramids to show that you understand what each of the sections means. So we're going to look at these two here, and I want you to complete this question. So write the question out. Compare the population structure of a knee with one for a hick. Okay, so they would give you this question. They would give you the 2 population pyramids. and then they would expect you to understand what's being asked of you. So obviously we would bug the question. So we know that compare is the command word. Now compare means you must use connectives, and we're looking for similarities and differences. We've been given a figure, the two population pyramids, so we should refer to it. We should use data where we can. Population structure. Think back, you've got that written down as a key word. That means the age and gender, or age and sex of the population in that country. And we're comparing a knee and a hick. So we've got those two pyramids. We should know our basic geographical knowledge that Mexico is a newly emerging economy and Japan is a high income country. So we know which one's which. So here I've given you a writing frame. So you might start by saying, in Japan, which is a hick, the population pyramid shape is, and give a general idea of that shape. Whereas in Mexico, a knee, it is more pyramid shaped. Okay, so that's a general overview. You then want to pick out some data. So the birth rate in Japan is, and put down what that is for the two gender. In comparison, Mexico's is this. Okay, so you're picking out specific areas to talk about. You might talk about the life expectancy, give some data from the figure, show that you are using the figure accurately. And this can be seen on the pyramid by the wider top area, whereas in Mexico. And then Japan has a what type of population do we know Japan has? Think about age range, while Mexico's is different. Okay, so use the writing frame if you need to. You can flick back to it, or obviously rewind back to it. And this is the question you're going to answer using these two pyramids. Okay, so that's the last thing I want you to do today. Hopefully that's given you a good indication of what population pyramids are and how they can be used. And remember, along with the DTM, you just need to have an understanding of how those different models and this way of presenting data can be used in enough of a way that you can complete one of them potentially, and that you could suggest reasons for what you can see. Okay, so this lesson obviously will be uploaded onto this classroom and kept here, so you can go back over it if you need to. Please submit the work into the Google Classroom, and I'm going through those today and trying to catch up with some of that checking and feedback. And I will see you either for a live lesson or recorded lesson later this week. See you later, guys. Bye.